Hi, I'm Dedra Jize, the Geriatric Care Manager with Litherland, Kennedy and Associates, a California estate planning and elder care law firm. Today I'm here with Tami Anastasia. She is a dementia consultant and educator and the author of her new book, The Essential Strategies for the Dementia Caregiver. Thank you, Tami, for coming. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Dedra. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we have talked a bit in other videos about your new book, how it's to help the caregiver and some wonderful strategies towards that. We have talked about a little bit about diagnosis as well as, well, we actually ended up on the topic of driving for those with dementia,
Yeah.
I find, I don't know about you, but, communication between a caregiver and caregiver can just be any family member. It doesn't have to, we're not talking like that paid person comes in the house. We're talking about a family member, and it doesn't have to be the spouse. It could be the children. It could be the neighbor. You may know somebody who has dementia, but the challenges of interacting, communicating with a person with dementia, that's often that's a big issue for many.
Yeah. Communicating is one of the biggest challenges that often caregivers do deal with. And so with friends, friends come in and their friend is no longer, or a relative comes to visit and they're no longer the way they used to be. And that's where, again, getting educated as much as possible about how this disease affects and changes the brain. Here's the reality that dementia is a progressive physiological degenerative brain disease, and it's going to cause problems with thinking, memory loss, language, problem solving. It's going to cause problems with reasoning. They're going to lose the ability to process information logically. It's going to have, at times as this disease progresses, you can't have a rational conversation with somebody with dementia. And it is really, really, really challenging and difficult for people to make that transition. And it's hard letting go of what was and learning ways to embrace now what is. So I spent a lot of time talking about ways to communicate with people in my book, but just a few tips right off the bat is to substitute saying you and instead start saying we, so that the person with dementia feels included, feels a part of, it's a sense of belonging. And that subtle change in and of itself increases cooperation, but it's very difficult. And the other thing with communication, it's very difficult not to take what your loved one says and does personally. And so I talk about the 4 Ds of dementia care in my book. And one of them is learning how to detach. And one of the things you want to remind yourself is that your loved one or your friend or relative is saying and doing these things because they have dementia. In other words, dementia is the cause of what they say and do. That also is really hard for people to wrap their brain around. But when you make it about the disease, it makes it much easier to detach and not take what your loved one says and does personally. And then another thing that occurs with dementia is they're accusatory. They'll blame people for stealing things. They'll blame people for hiding things from them. They'll blame you for not telling them about this event because they don't remember, right? They don't remember they hid it. They don't remember that you shared that information with them. And what people need to know is people with dementia believe what their brain tells them. So you want to avoid arguing with them. You want to avoid correcting. And a lot of caregivers will over explain things and go into a lengthy conversation. And you don't want to do that with people with dementia. But communication is super, super challenging. Keep your sentences and your questions short and simple. Give them 2 choices. Don't say, what would you like to have for dinner tonight? You want a hamburger and fries? You want tuna salad? Or would you rather have eggs? No, 2 choices. Keep it simple. We still want to let the person with dementia feel they still have a say in choices, but we want to simplify and modify our communication with them.
I think those are all great tips. It's just so hard for the caregiver, especially in the beginning the early
Yes.
stages, just to make that transition. I mean, how many times have you heard, I've heard a lot, so many, it's like, well, I would never lie to my husband. I never
Yes.
lied to my wife.
Yes.
Never. We have never lied in 50 years. I'm not going to do it now.
Yes.
What do you
Yes.
say?
Yeah. So in the dementia literature, there is, and in my book, I do talk about the controversy of it. I'm assuming you're referring to the therapeutic, quote unquote, fibbing, or I like to think of it as therapeutic acts of kindness, right?
There you go. I mean,
Yeah.
because I talked, I said, when I'm talking to my clients, it's like, well, if your loved one says, wow, look at that, that purple sky out there, and it's a blue sunny day.
Yeah.
Why would you argue? And it's like, that is the prettiest sky, purple sky I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing early on, that's a really hard concept. As this disease progresses, you kind of are almost forced to have to change the way you communicate. And again, what I had mentioned earlier in one of the other videos we did is to meet them in their world, because their world is now altered. But we also have to keep in mind the caregiver is going through a tremendous amount of loss too, right? Their loved one's not who they were. So you learn to pick your battles. Easier to say, yeah, it's a beautiful sky, it is purple, and not get into wanting to challenge them and correct them. And it's easier, believe it or not, as this disease progresses, you see where the value is in that. Early on, sometimes I think the caregiver wants to preserve what was. They want to correct them. Maybe I'll make it better, because if I don't correct them, it might make their situation worse. And there's nothing you're doing to make the situation worse. Dementia is a progressive brain disease. What does that mean? Brain cells are dying, they're deteriorating. So easier to enter their world earlier on and make this adjustment, but also realize it's super, super difficult to do that because they are dealing with a loss of who their loved one was also. And we have to keep in mind the feelings that the caregiver goes through. So you could see why they may want to have this investment of wanting to correct them and make it right. But when you're dealing with somebody with dementia, that actually does more harm than good.
And I would say the one other thing that I would want to address in communication is the constant asking of the same question. I know for myself, because I'm usually working with families who have their loved one in receiving care outside the home.
Yeah.
And they go visit them. When do I get to come home?
Yeah.
When do I get to come home?
Yeah.
And it just is heart-wrenching.
Yes.
If you don't have a response,
yes.
the same response,
yes.
throw it on the doctor. It's not you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to talk to the doctor about that and have one response. Once you find what works.
Yeah.
Keep it going. Just answer the same question, even if it's 10 times in the same visit.
Yeah.
So preserve your sanity, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point. So yes, repetitive questions wear out the caregiver a lot. And so let me say something about that. Thank you for bringing that up. So repetitive questions are also often expressing a need, right? They'll repeat the same thing over and over. And often when somebody with dementia, when they lose their ability to express directly what they need, it'll often get expressed in repeating a question. And so I talk a lot about this in my book as well, what those needs might be. So when we hear them say they want to go home and they're in a care community or they're in their home, home is often a metaphor of wanting, we're going to look at the need of wanting to feel safe, wanting to feel secure, and familiarity. So we do respond, again, here's where the caregiver has to not take it literally, but come up with 2 or 3 what we call interchangeable responses to the repetitive questions and listen to the themes of what they're asking. Sometimes they want to share things that are important or things that they're very afraid of or they're concerned about, or they're in pain. And so when we can identify what the theme might be, then we do, like you said, prepare some responses that we use interchangeably. So home is representative of, again, feeling a sense of secure, feeling familiarity, and feeling safe. So we might say, I'll look into that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I love being with you, and reassure them that we're in this together. You're not going anywhere, because often it's also a fear. You just leaving me here? You're just dumping me here? Because they don't recognize what now is their environment. They don't recognize in their own home. They may flash back as this brain deteriorates to a home that they remember when they were kids, when they were in college, right? We don't often know the home they may be referencing, but focus on the need and then provide a comforting, reassuring response. Often, again, that involves feeling safe, feeling secure, and makes the familiarity. I love you. I am so excited we get to spend time together. It's that reassurance they're looking for.
Right, right. Well, those are excellent ideas. Communication is what drives people to insanity at times.
Yeah.
I won't talk personal experience. No. But it's very it's challenging. It's just one, but it's just one of many. So I appreciate you spending the morning here talking about this with dementia and the challenge of communication.
Yes.
And you do have a new book, The Dementia Caregiver. So tell me about that book and where someone can find it.
Yeah, so the book has a lot of what we just discussed, right? Umpteen million different ideas on how to communicate and what to expect as your loved one, as the brain deteriorates. So my book, Essential Strategies for the Dementia Caregiver, Learning to Pace Yourself, can be purchased on Amazon, or you can purchase it at my website, which is www.tamianastasia.com. And again, that's TAMIANASTASIA.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Tami, for joining me today. And as always, enjoy and always learn something talking to you.
Thank you, Dedra, for having me.